Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod, and I'm your Life Mastery coach, and I'm the host and creator of this program, and a bunch of other ones, too, that I will share with you at another time. You know, today we're going to talk about compassion, a capacity to empathize with someone else's suffering while at the same time experiencing a desire to alleviate that suffering. Now, if you've been keeping track, you'll notice that this is the fourth key in the life mastery cycle. And our discussion today is going to focus on topics such as what is compassion? What should we do, or when should we step in to stop suffering? 3, what are some of the benefits of compassion? And 4, how do you develop an ongoing practice? And today, I'm delighted to have my friend and mentor here to join us for this discussion, Jared Rosen. Now, Jared is an artist, author, publisher, and media producer. He has published many books, including his most recent, Drowning in the Light, from Waterfront Press. He's also created several corporate self-development programs, including Whole Self-Management and Organizational Soul Intelligence. Jared is currently the founder and chief creative officer of Dream Sculpt Books and Media, which is soon to be going, I guess it's going to be going public pretty soon, eh, Jared? Welcome aboard, Jared, and thanks for joining me today for today's show.
Well, thanks for having me on, David.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, you and I have known each other for quite a while now, and I know you to be a man of a big, beautiful heart and just a lot of built-in compassion, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on this for this particular topic. I wanted to ask you to help us learn a little bit more about compassion and how that can help people in their lives. And maybe in particular, you can tell us a little bit about how compassion has shown up in your life and how it's helped you to develop into the kind of person you are.
Absolutely. Well, I think I can give a little historical perspective. Back in the late 1970s, I was living in New York City, and I was an artist showing in the galleries in Soho, and very much involved in media and basically, in all honesty, my ego, to be someone special, to do something special, and having a very powerful and life-changing spiritual experience doing yoga. And back in 1979, yoga wasn't a multi-billion-dollar industry. But rather, I was doing yoga in my living room and on the floor, on the hardwood floor. And I had what was called classically a kundalini. Like I completely felt like I dissolved and there was no sense of self anymore. And that's a challenging place to be in the art world where it's all about self. So eventually I moved out of New York, came out to California, got my master's degree and became a therapist and worked. I worked in a lot of different facilities. And what I discovered was that everyone was dealing with the same issues, fundamentally. And it was a mirror of my own quote unquote issues. Mm-hmm. And that is the need to be wanted, the need to be loved, the need to feel like you make a difference, that you have that there's a purpose for you to be here.
Right.
And that was a very big transition from focus on being known to focus on knowing people and what their needs are. And I would say one of the biggest transformations happened for me. I was working in forensic psychiatry, working with people that had, like the crazy people that go out and shoot people and stuff.
Oh my.
That aren't in prison. Mm-hmm. And I really came to a place where it wasn't about what they did. Like if I read their chart and discovered that I cut somebody up into pieces, and I won't go there, but it was
wow.
like, who are they? Who are they now in this moment, as opposed to what they have done? And so to me, compassion is kind of love in the moment. You can think about somebody, you can feel them, you can feel love, you can feel concern for them. These are all aspects, of this sense of heartful caring. Mm-hmm. And it really transformed me doing that work. because eventually I came to a place where I realized I really had cultivated this incredible sense of compassion for others, for the world, for everyone. And but I bypassed one person. Maybe you can guess who that was.
Oh, yeah, I think I know who you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. So it's like brutal on myself, caring, wanting to help everyone, do everything possible that we can. And recently, as a publisher, we have an author that has written a wonderful book around the feet, and he has a nonprofit that distributes shoes to the homeless. So he was in Los Angeles, and we actually shot a film. We were on the streets of LA and streets of Hollywood, distributing new shoes to homeless people. And this wasn't at a shelter. This was like driving the car, seeing a tent, getting out of the car, saying, "Hey, would you like a pair of shoes?" What I discovered was that all of the homeless people that I met, all of them that day, had one thing in common: an incredible sense of compassion. And I tried to figure out, I was like, what is it that makes somebody living on the street have this non-ordinary sense of compassion? Maybe that's the point where we can discuss, like, what is it that awakens compassion?
Well, I think that's a great topic. And, I'm still kind of tripping over the stuff you talked about before of the forensic psychiatry thing. I had a Dexter moment there. I don't know if you've heard of Dexter, the TV show, but I certainly had that Dexter moment. And I'm imagining, I don't know if you've ever watched that show or if anybody has.
I haven't. No, I'm pretty weak when it comes to television shows. I binge watch series on HBO and stuff like that. But
the concept is that Dexter is just a guy like you or me. He happens to work in the police department as a forensic blood spatter analyst, and he happens to be a serial killer in the process. Now, his approach is he only kills people who have slipped through the cracks, who have demonstrated that they are psychopathic, sociopathic, or whatever, and they do evil things to other people. And yet the justice system doesn't know how to catch them or stop them. So he steps in and, so it's kind of a savior complex kind of thing and everything. But the thing about that show, aside from all the gore and the details and everything, is there's something about him. He wants to be a good person. Deep down inside, he wants to be a good person. And he believes in his mind that the way he is behaving is, in fact, being a good person. And this led me to understand something much more deeply than I had ever thought of before, and that is our shadows, the dark parts of ourselves, are always trying to do something in a way that brings more love into the world. They may be doing it in a dysfunctional way, but that's what they do. And so I think what Dexter represents is the dark parts of ourselves that we try to do something good in the world, and yet we keep messing things up. We create a lot of chaos and disorder and confusion, maybe even some destruction in the process of creating this love that we're trying to bring in. So what I saw from that is it's possible to be compassionate for someone no matter how dark or how unpleasant their behavior might be. It's possible to recognize that they are, in their own way, they are suffering, even though I may not necessarily be able to relate to that suffering in a cognitive way. I might have to do a little bit of projection. I might have to do something that says, wow, I can't imagine that kind of pain in my life that requires me to do that. But I can imagine this kind of pain over here, which is very similar. And maybe I can now help to understand that person's suffering. And I can help maybe bring some alleviation to that suffering if that's what they want. Now, that was a long-winded explanation, I know, but how does that resonate for you?
Well, it made me think about how a lot of people really don't really fully understand the definition of compassion, or the distinction between compassion and empathy and sympathy.
Correct.
So we know that with sympathy, it's sort of like, it's like pity. So for instance, if I was distributing the shoes, and streets of Hollywood with with this doctor who has a nonprofit, and I was coming from a place of sympathy, I'd be like, oh, these poor people, they're just sleeping in a tent, you know. Of course, I could have like no sympathy, like, you know what, they created the reality. Or
That's right.
Empathy is like really feeling. It's like you feel the feelings, you know. And so for me, what I felt was people that just had a really big heart that didn't fit into the world. And so empathy is very close to compassion, but empathy really is a one-on-one kind of experience. Like, you know, you have empathy for that person. So compassion for me is for all people living on the streets, and then because they're suffering. But then it's like, how about people that are not living on the streets and suffering? So compassion in a kind of Buddhist sense of it is compassion for all sentient beings.
Right.
It's basically saying which comes from this understanding that separation is the source of all suffering.
Right.
That it's the feeling of separation. When I developed some work that I taught for many years, I looked at energy and saw that there are two basic energetics of emotions. There's love and all the subsets of love, which is the feeling of wholeness, integration. I mean, literally, when you see somebody, you love them, you want to connect with them, right? When you see somebody or you know somebody you don't love, as a matter of fact, you despise them or you have this terrible feeling, you want to pull away. But separation. The same thing about sadness is the feeling of being pulled away. If somebody leaves you, in a relationship, that feeling of sadness, it's the feeling of separation. So it's always that feeling of separation. So I think that the highest consciousness that we can embody is this sort of compassion for all living beings. And it's the hardest. It's especially, depending where you are politically, what's going on in this country in the polarization. It's really hard, for instance, if somebody just absolutely despises or hates a particular political figure, it brings out the worst, including people that have shot, political figures. I mean, obviously, we've seen that happen, from Lincoln on to Steve Scalise in the baseball game a year ago. People, they find something that they don't agree with someone, and they're threatened. And so going back to Dexter, it's like you want to eliminate that threat because you feel like that's actually that the outcome is going to be better for all. That's why people have that. That's why we have the quote unquote death penalty, which I find, really kind of against, if you believe in God, because isn't it in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill? But you feel that's justice,
Right. Yeah. I find there was a lot that you said there that I really was resonating with, and I wanted to just kind of maybe you could try and piece through these a little bit. Sure. The first was you mentioned the difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. I think that's a really, really important distinction. I think sympathy is something that we all know what that's like. Oh, that poor person. We don't really feel necessarily any desire to help them in any way. We're just saying, oh, that poor person, and we move on with our day. That's the pity thing that you were talking about. But empathy, on the other hand, is more. It's a kind of a projection, really, because let's say I see you fall down and break your leg, as an example. Now, I may never have broken my leg, but I've had other kinds of injuries that have caused pain for me. So I can certainly understand that you're probably feeling a lot of pain right now. And so I can empathize by projecting my idea of pain onto your situation. Absolutely. And now I'm not, I may have a little bit of sympathy mixed in with that. I may be saying, oh, you poor guy, whatever. But I am feeling it internally because I know what it's like to have that kind of pain in my life. So to me, that's the difference between sympathy and empathy. Now, compassion, on the other hand, basically takes that empathy and says, oh, I'm empathizing with your situation, but in addition, I'm feeling a really strong desire to help relieve your suffering. That's the big difference, is that active component that runs inside me and says, oh, I got to do something to help this guy because he's in such pain and I got to relieve his suffering. And that's really where the distinction between those three comes into play. So And you mentioned something else earlier on. I'm not going to let you forget
in
this.
action. Mm-hmm.
Correct. Empathy in action, if you like. Now, the other piece was self-compassion. And you talked about this earlier. Mm-hmm. It's easy, I think, for us to project outwards and look at other people and feel compassion for them. But if we forget to bring that compassion inward and to look at our own suffering and to empathize with our own suffering and to look for some action to try and alleviate that suffering, then we are doing our own selves a big disservice. And we may, because we're ignoring ourselves, we may be creating even more pain than we realize. Whereas if we bring that same level of compassion to ourselves that we're willing to bring to other people outside of ourselves, then we can magnify love in the world in huge ways.
Yeah.
Does that resonate for you?
Absolutely. I think that going back to my own personal sort of awakening that I didn't have compassion for myself and for everyone else, it had to do with my my financial reality. And my dad back there in the 20s was like, you want to help everyone, you want to, heal the world, but like, you gotta focus on making money because, you want to have a family, you want to have a home. And I was back then was like, I don't care about it. The world is my family. The earth is my home. I want to protect the earth. And I found that I kind of
So basically you were a hippie is what you're saying.
I was, yeah. Well, at heart, if the hippie's about peace and love, then I probably still am. I got the flowers.
I'm not denigrating hippies at all. I love that energy, actually. So yeah, and I bet there's lots of people who are listening to this right now who have exactly that same experience. They had their desires, and they had parents who said, "Wait a minute, you got to look at the realities here. You got to get a real job. You got to do this. You got to do that." I had that myself. So yeah, keep going.
But you transform it. You transform it, and how you transform it is realizing that by serving yourself. It's the old oxygen mask airplane, analogy. It's like you put the mask on yourself before you put it on your child. So by, for instance, being able to distribute shoes, working with his doctor and developing his book and his media platform, I got to experience the joy of the abundance of being like Santa Claus, of like, and it's a great feeling, to give. So, people that, financial abundance of prosperity is one of the greatest gifts to fuel compassion, which we see in some of the great, wealthy figures out there that are doing those things, whether it's Elon Musk going to Flint and putting in water filters, or, every day there's an act of compassion. Now, the small acts of compassion, you don't have to put shoes on the homeless or give out water filters in Flint. You have an opportunity every moment, every day, every single person listening to this. It's about opening your heart, and it sounds kind of like a platitude, like, hey, open your heart, but it really is the heart, not necessarily the actual physical heart, but that sort of spiritual heart or energetic heart is like the lens of a camera, like the aperture, or the flower petals. So when you open, you radiate, and it's kind of invisible, but there's this field of love, of compassion that radiates from your being. And that's why people, for instance, if anyone's ever heard of Amma, the Indian, East Indian guru, thousands of people flock to her just to get a hug from her. Yeah. So the act of compassion for her, is it hugging like, oh, poor thing, I'll give you a hug? Or is like, I'm this generator through my heart of compassion, and when you come close to me, you'll be ignited by that higher love.
Yeah, that's a beautiful reference, actually. That the hug lady, absolutely, she's amazing. And what's interesting to me is, any one of us can do this. You don't have to be a wealthy Elon Musk. You don't have to be somebody who travels around India in sandals on your feet, in the dirt. You don't have to be like that. You can be yourself, and you can have an open heart. It isn't that hard, really.
It isn't that hard, and it brings joy. It brings joy.
Right, right.
I'm telling you, when you do the greatest joy, what do we all want? We all want joy. Even if you want money, even if your highest desire is to make a lot of money. Why? Because you want to have joy. You want to travel. You want to eat at great restaurants. You want to buy clothing, whatever it is. But really what it comes down to, the joy, the greatest joy we have. I mean, what's the best joy? Christmas morning when you open up your presents, or Christmas morning when your kids open up their presents?
Yeah, that's
you
great.
Know?
Yeah.
So the greatest joy that we have, and which is the highest frequency of experience on planet Earth and the body, is to experience joy, unbridled joy. There's no resistance, and so, you know, everyone today that's listening to this can go and exercise that, and you're going to actually expand your happiness.
You know, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because that brings me to another aspect of the topic of compassion, which is, what are the benefits of compassion? Well, you already alluded to one of them, and that is compassion increases the production of DHEA, which is the youth hormone. And it also increases the production of oxytocin, which is the joy hormone. Those two things alone.
Not OxyContin, remember, people.
Right. Oxytocin. Yeah.
Oxytocin.
Yeah. And that oxytocin, it heals pain, it reduces social fears, it increases intimacy, and it relieves stress even more. I mean, think about it. Wouldn't you want to find a way of relieving your stress, of reducing cortisol, of increasing your youth hormone, of making yourself healthier as a result? Well, if you want to do that, start practicing compassion. Compassion is the key to joy, the key to happiness, and that's what the Dalai Lama calls it. Totally right, because my experience, you know, in this lifetime has really taught me that not only is it the joy that you experience, but you also actually build the vibration of the community that's going to support absolutely.
your highest visions. And it's not because you're doing this. If I do these 10 acts of compassion, I'm going to get points. You know, it's not like that. It's all about the reduction or the elimination of resistance.
Right.
So if you walk past somebody and they're lying there in the gutter and you think they may actually be dead, you know, one thing is like, oh, another homeless person. It's like, oh, guy looks like he's dead. I wonder if he's dead. Or you can stop and see if there's a pulse, you know, and what's people like, I don't want to touch that person. He's dirty. There's germs or whatever. It's like you stop and hey, you okay? You know, I just saw this the other day in Hollywood. It was a guy at a bus stop and he was passed out and he slipped off the bench. And his leg was dangling on Melrose Avenue, which there's not even enough room to ride a bike. It's so tight where the cars come in. Very easily, his leg could have just been severed right off. And I was looking at him and I was about to go and actually, and like startle him, like, you know, dude, you know, get your leg out of the road. And as soon as I had that thought, he woke up, like his eyes woke up and he pulled his leg out of the road. So who knows, maybe a compassionate thoughts actually have a better result than we can imagine. You know, just thinking the compassionate thought. Right. Somebody was thinking, hey, buddy, you should get your leg out of the road, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely true. I mean, when we elevate our own thoughts and our own awareness and, you know, the level of our own compassion, we generate our own field around us, which has ripple effects out into the community around us. And so we have no idea how much impact those have. It's just something that, the way I look at it is, if I'm going to have some kind of an impact, and I am, just by being, I have an impact, then I might as well choose to have the kind of impact I want to have, so that one day when I look back on it, I can say, yeah, I'm proud of that particular impact that I created. rather than looking back and say, oh, I think I'm a little bit ashamed of that impact. Now, is there something I need to do to fix it? Is there something I need to do to go back and do amends or something like that with people? So this is really, really an awesome conversation that we're having here, and I'm just so excited to see you get all lit up around compassion.
I love to light up, so well, you can take that the wrong way, or the right way. But it's we're like a light bulb. Seriously, we can spend our lives dimly lit, or we can turn up the dial like on a dimmer switch,
Right.
so the light becomes brighter. And the question is, what's making it brighter? What's the filament? Well, the filament, I think it's the soul. And what is the filament in a bulb is touching the source of electricity. And it's in this bulb, which is this vacuum and this shell. So we're maybe like this shell. And if we just light up, and how do you light up? It's just opening up this lens, like I talked about the heart, living that way. And then it becomes like a habit. But the hardest habit to break is I said earlier, which probably most people can relate, is compassion for self.
Right.
And that's what we condition ourselves like, I should have, one thing that could really help for a compassion for self, and I don't want to say it like some platitude, like don't should on yourself, but the shoulds, the should have, the would have, the could haves are an illusion. If your mind goes there, well, if I had done that, I could have made $1 million, or I should have gone there. If I went there, then I would have made $1 million, whatever it is that you want, or, I should have done that. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't have got sick. It's all an illusion. And yes, it sounds like a platitude too, but actually if you embody that, then you can't live there anymore. And you just have to live in this moment. And when you live in this moment, it's not even like time, you're just presence itself. And then you become aware of everything around you. And that's how gratitude is this sort of key to self-compassion. Having gratitude for what you have, then you have compassion for yourself. And I don't think it's really easy to have compassion for others if you don't have it for yourself. It's like self-love. If you don't love yourself, you're really going to fall in love with somebody, or you're going to fall into this illusion of love. And I think most relationships break up, marriages get into divorce, because one or both parties has not cultivated that sense of self-love, and they're looking at from the other person, or blaming them that they're not getting enough.
Mm-hmm. So, first of all, I want to say I don't think it's just a platitude to claim that what you're imagining, the what ifs, is an illusion, because it is. It's just a story you're making up in your head. You're creating all these scenarios, and you're letting yourself get caught up in them, and it's a wonderful place of drama that the ego mind absolutely loves to play in. That's what the ego mind does. And it will continue to do it as long as you allow it to do it. But here, folks, here's a real powerful thing that you can do, is you can say, wow, I have an ego mind that likes making up these stories. And now all I can do is I can have compassion for my ego mind, because my ego mind is also suffering. So why not have compassion for your ego mind and bring love to it and say, I am the adult here. I know that this is the choice I made. For better or worse, that's the choice I made. We're not going to play this game. Let's carry on with what if that, what if that, what if that, what if that. Those are just made up stories. Let's instead choose where we want to go over here. That's what I'd like to do with you. And I want to do it together with you. So your soul, your being can now integrate with your ego mind, and you can choose a path together. And that can only happen when you have self-compassion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so important. And it's important for a number of reasons. Just in business in general. I'm going to talk about truth and compassion. So, for instance, I publish books, and absolutely delighted to be the publisher of your forthcoming book, which is going to be it's a great book. And people come to me with, kind of it's, of course, it's coming from the ego, and there's nothing bad about it, with a lot of expectation, and I see it as false expectation. So for me, compassion is not saying, you're going to be a best-selling author. I know you are. I had a dream that you're going to be a best-selling author, or believe it, believe it. Instead, compassion for me is helping somebody understand that there's probably a lot of fear that they're going through, and that they need to kind of let go. And it's it's like you don't know, just how the book is going to sell. Just don't focus, don't project. And in a way, it's a little tough love. It's like, just do your best and like just get off of it. Just don't keep tripping out on the need to be a bestseller. And it's part of the truth is that very few books is like winning a lottery ticket, a real bestseller, not just kind of Amazon ranking. So compassion shows up in business that way, and I think that's if somebody is a business owner. And for instance, somebody that they're working with, one of their employees, is having a really hard time. Well, there's 3 ways to go. One is like, I don't give a damn if you're having a hard time. Deal with that at home. You're getting paid by me at work. That right. Is basically, that's the cruel, selfish,
the Scrooge approach.
Exactly. The second one is a lot of like sympathy. It's like, oh, we'll take a week off, and I feel so sorry for you. Everyone's going to send you a card and all that. And yes, it's nice to get a card. And if you're sick, yeah, take a week off. Take what time you need to heal. But the more compassionate approach, I think, would be is I totally understand what you're going through. How can I support you? How can we support you? And also, how do we accomplish that? What you need to do? What you're being paid to do? Because if you're not in your truth, and it's one or the other. You hear of business owners that are usually this, they're controlling and very, micromanaging. And then you hear people that are just like so delightful to work with. But a lot of times when people are delightful to work with, they're not in their own power and in their own truth. And they could be really nice. That's like, oh, my boss I don't understand why I'm laid off. My boss always liked me. He was always nice and everything. And all of a sudden, because that person didn't have the truth. And so because they can't deal with it, because they don't want to feel bad. You don't want to give somebody bad news. But if a doctor came and said, oh, yeah, you're okay. It's nothing. Don't worry about it. It's just a little cancer. It's okay. Other people have it. It'd be like, yeah, so you have to be in your truth. And I think that's where people get confused is if, I want to be compassionate, so I shouldn't tell them, and then it's only going to, that's called suppression. Right.
Well, all right. So let's just take a couple of minutes here and talk about how people can develop a practice of compassion, both for others and for themselves. What do you recommend that people do?
Well, I think it is a practice, and it's a way of being, and it's a natural, innate human condition. Compassion. I mean, everyone comes out, and they're strong. When I lived up in Sonoma, I had a house there, and it was an awful fire up there. I mean, when I came back, I had my house for sale. I came back to town. Every single window had hearts in it. It was all about love. Love is stronger than the smoke. The love in the air is stronger than the smoke. Yeah. So it's like we in disasters, it's forced upon us in a way. For most people, not forced, but the conditions are so hard. If you're in a fire and you end up having to go to a shelter, those conditions are really hard. So, and you see other people suffering worse than you, and you get out of yourself, and it's like, oh, wow, how can I be there? So how do we develop it without waiting for a disaster to happen? It really is about being aware in all conditions of people and listening and feeling where they are. And sometimes it's just an acknowledgement. Compassion could be as simple as, and that's an action as well. It's like, it's not like I know how you're feeling. Because if you don't, that's false empathy. It's like, oh, I know how you're feeling. Wait, but I've never had cancer, so how do I really know what it's feeling? Empathy is like, yeah, I was there. I had chemo. I know what it feels like. It sucks when you throw up, right? When your hair falls out. That's true empathy. So I would say make it authentic. Don't go around doing inauthentic, and you'll discover that every moment you have is an opportunity when you're with people. Feel compassion. And I'd say start with yourself and like do an inventory of where you lack compassion for yourself, where you beat yourself up, where you don't really accept yourself, and then, you know, and I think gratitude and compassion are very symbiotic.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's really great. So just to summarize, I would say the first thing would be awareness, developing an awareness of what's going on in yourself, in your life, all around you, in the people around you, and so forth.
Your inner environment and your outer environment.
Correct, yeah. And as you develop that awareness, start looking at areas. Here's what I would recommend anyway, is look at areas where you might be experiencing some suffering, you yourself. And it doesn't have to be massive suffering, like you've got some cancer or some disease or something, but you're experiencing pain in your life. Can you bring empathy and compassion to that pain and love, healing energy to it, so that you can relieve your own suffering in such a way that you can start showing up more authentically in the world? Those are and then, of course, if you can look at the suffering and ask the question, what is the gift in this suffering? What is it that I'm learning about myself in this suffering that I might not have learned otherwise? Can you be grateful for that and take that learning to the next phase of your life? In other words, you want to keep expanding and growing and enlightening, as it were, by lighting up even more. And the way you do that is by healing all your pain and getting rid of the little resistances in your body and making yourself more authentic moment by moment. Do you agree with that, Jared?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think, you know, authenticity really is identifying with your true self, your high self, whatever that is living from that place and not being concerned how other people experience you, because it's not going to really serve you if you're continually looking for look to see out of other people's eyes. To see out of other people's eyes from a place of compassion is really an incredible thing, but to see the judgments that other people may have or project those judgments, and you just keep trapped in this sense of separation, and so I think love is always, you know, an inside job.
Absolutely. Well, Jared, it's been great. Thank you so much for being with me
You're
today,
welcome.
and for sharing your wisdom with all the fine folks who are watching this. And to all of you out there, I just want to say thank you so much for participating in today's program. You can watch recordings of this and all other previous shows on my website at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. And as we close out, I just want to remind you about the Life Mastery mantra. Gratefully forgive the imperfect being that you have been in the past. Gratefully accept the magnificent being that you are right now. And gratefully welcome the evolved being you are becoming in each new moment. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on Life Mastery TV.